They say the camera never lies, but I've come to realize that some of the biggest lies are told with the brightest smiles, the most perfectly lit photos, and captions filled with sunshine and healing quotes. My name is Emily Harper. I'm 32, and I just buried my best friend, Claire Monroe, or as the internet knew her, Claire with Grace, the digital goddess of wellness, positivity, and the perfect life. Millions followed her. She inspired women to glow up, to eat clean, to journal daily, to manifest love and money, to love themselves because she seemed to do it effortlessly. She had the house, the fiance, the brand deals, the clear skin, the Pilates routine, the TED Talk, but the Claire I buried wasn't glowing. She was pale, trembling, and silent, and no, she didn't die from some tragic accident. The truth is, more complicated, and I can't stop asking myself one question: did I really know her at all? After the funeral, I couldn't sleep. I went through old pictures, her YouTube videos, her podcast clips. I was trying to hold on to something, anything. And then I found it. Her iPad. It wasn't locked. She never locked it, said she trusted me more than she trusted herself. I almost didn't open the app that changed everything. A folder inside her notes, hidden in plain sight, named with a single emoji. A mirror. Inside were hundreds of entries, dated, emotional, raw. It wasn't a journal. It was a confession booth. And what I read, it shattered the image the world had of her, and maybe that's why she never meant for anyone to find it, or maybe she did, because the last entry was written the day before she died, and it had my name on it. Emily, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. That was the first line. I must have read it a dozen times, blinking hard, hoping I was misreading it. But Claire's handwriting, her rhythm, her punctuation, even the way she overused ellipses was unmistakable. She wrote about feeling like she was living two lives, one that everyone adored, one that she despised. She said the version of herself online was a manufactured saint, someone built not to inspire, but to distract from what was really going on. She spoke about the pressure, the kind no one talks about, waking up every day knowing millions of people were expecting you to be perfect, that a single bad day could spark rumors, that gaining 5 pounds would cost thousands to comment, "Are you okay?" That being authentic was never safe. Not when your brand was your life. She wrote, "I'm suffocating, Em. Every photo I post is like a tiny coffin I'm building for myself, beautiful, polished, but still a coffin." And then the names began to appear. One by one, she listed people who had hurt her, used her, betrayed her. A manager who took 30% but threatened her with blackmail if she tried to leave. A fiancé, yes. That perfect fiancé who had more secrets than smiles. She knew he cheated. She even knew with who. The betrayal wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that she stayed for the image, because I'd rather be miserable with someone who looks good next to me in a photo than be alone and forgotten. That sentence made my stomach twist up because Claire wasn't like that. When we were younger, she was the girl who painted her walls black and wore boots in summer. She hated fake. She hated filters. She called it spiritual plastic. But somewhere between the follower milestones and skincare partnerships, she disappeared. And I didn't notice, or maybe I did, and I chose not to see it. But the last paragraph of that entry changed everything. "You always saw me. Emily, please see me now. Read them all, then decide what to do. I'm trusting you with my real story, my truth, my last wish." It wasn't a diary anymore. It was a responsibility, and I wasn't sure I wanted it. The entries spanned 3 years. 3 years of perfectly filtered content, neatly captioned affirmations, staged routines, and branded joy. But behind the scenes, Claire was unraveling. She detailed how her therapist begged her to take a break, how she secretly stopped going to yoga, and how her clean eating spiraled into binge eating, followed by days of starvation to keep up her image. There were voice notes embedded into the entries. One of them played automatically when I tapped the date, March 8th. I feel like I'm made of glass. Everyone thinks I'm glowing, but really, I'm just reflecting their expectations. If I stop smiling, everything cracks. I had to pause it. Her voice didn't sound like her. It sounded exhausted, numb, like all the sparkle had been drained out and replaced with silence. That day's entry was titled The Performance. She wrote about a brand photo shoot for a luxury skincare line one that brought in over 6 figures. She smiled, posed, wore silk robes and sipped lemon water. But what the world didn't see was that just before the shoot, she had taken 2 anxiety pills and thrown up in the studio bathroom from the stress. They said I looked radiant. I just looked empty. And then came something even darker. A draft email to her followers. It was never sent. It was titled, When the Curtain Falls. In it, she described the disconnect between who she was and who she had to be. She said the online world had become a stage where everyone's clapping, but no one notices the actress bleeding behind the curtain. Claire wasn't just tired. She was breaking, and I didn't know what to do with that truth. The internet adored her. They reposted her quotes, named their babies after her, built businesses inspired by her lifestyle. If I revealed what I now knew, I wouldn't just be destroying a brand, I'd be rewriting her legacy. That the diary didn't stop there. There were entries about me, some of them kind, some of them brutally honest. She wrote, Emily is the only one who knew the original version of me, the me before the ring lights and retreats. She saw me when I was lost and never looked away. But now, even she only sees the edited version because I made sure of it. I remember sitting on the floor, the iPad shaking in my hands, as if every word rewrote the memories I had of us. She confessed that she'd push me away deliberately, not out of anger, not out of pride. Out of shame. I don't want her to see me like this. She tried to save me. She always does. But I'm past saving. I just want her to remember me as someone who mattered. That line hit harder than any because I would have saved her, or at least I would have tried. She recalled moments I'd forgotten, late night calls when we were in college, me bringing soup when she had strep throat, dancing in the rain after a breakup. All the raw, messy, beautiful moments before the perfection. But the more I read, the more I realized Claire didn't just disappear from my life. She erased herself from everyone's. She described how she created burner accounts to defend herself online, how she sometimes cried during live streams and blamed it on allergies, how she was quietly battling panic attacks while selling calmness, and then she dropped a name. I didn't expect Julia, her sister, her estranged sister. They hadn't spoken in 5 years. Claire had always told me Julia was unstable, manipulative, even dangerous. But in her diary, the story was different. She wrote, Julia wasn't the villain. I was. I cut her out to protect my image. Her truth was too messy, too real, and real didn't trend. It was like someone punched me in the chest. Claire's entire online persona was built on a lie she told herself to survive. But the consequences were real, tangible, painful. And now that pain was mine to carry because I wasn't just reading this diary anymore. I was becoming part of the story, and something told me I hadn't seen the darkest part yet. After finishing that entry about Julia, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know what happened between them. The Claire I knew was fiercely loyal, almost obsessively so. For her to cut her own sister out of her life, that wasn't just an argument. That was something deeper, and I remembered something strange. Claire had a locked room in her house. She told everyone it was her content storage. Tripods, ring lights, backdrop kits. No one was allowed inside, ever. But now I couldn't help wondering, was that where the real Claire lived? The next day, I returned to her house with the spare key she'd given me a year ago. Her parents hadn't cleared it yet. They couldn't bring themselves to. The candles still smelled like vanilla. Her perfume still lingered in the hallway, and the door was still locked. I found the key in her jewelry box. It was labeled with a tiny sticker, offline. When I opened the door, the air inside felt stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in months. Maybe years. What I found wasn't tripods or lights. It was a wall of printed photos of her and Julia. Vacations, birthdays, inside jokes scribbled in Sharpie. All of it lovingly pinned, like a shrine to the sister she claimed didn't exist anymore. And in the middle of the wall was a note. Handwritten, folded once. No envelope. It read, "Forgive me. I chose the world over you." There were journals, physical. One stacked in boxes, too. I hadn't known she still wrote by hand. They were older, dated before the digital entries. I opened the one marked 2017, the year Claire went viral, and I finally saw the beginning of it all. The brand deal that first changed her life. The day she was asked to post about a product she'd never used. She said yes, and that one yes became 100 more. She wrote, "The moment I started lying for money, I realized how easy it is to become someone you don't recognize." It was in that same journal that I found a sketch of a logo. Not Claire with grace. It was Julia and me. A podcast they had planned, a dream. Before it all changed. Suddenly, it was clear. Claire didn't just abandon her sister, she abandoned herself, and now I had to find Julia, because the truth didn't just live in Claire's diary. It might be living in someone else's grief. I hadn't seen Julia Monroe in almost 6 years. Last I heard, she'd moved to Portland, cut off social media, and started working with trauma survivors. Claire never mentioned her except in vague, dismissive tones. She's complicated. She's unstable. She's not safe. But after reading Claire's confessions, I knew those words weren't fair. They were a wall Claire built to protect her image. A wall I now needed to tear down. I found Julia through a mutual college friend on LinkedIn, of all places. Her profile was blank, no photo. Just a simple title, support worker, mental health and crisis care. I sent a message. 3 days passed with no reply. Then one word appeared in my inbox. Why? I stared at the screen, unsure how to answer, but then I typed, "It's about Claire, please. She left something for you and me. It's not what you think." 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Her voice was lower than I remembered. Worn, like it had traveled through fire to get to. You read it, didn't you?" I didn't ask how she knew. She told me she felt it. Said she'd had a dream about Claire the night before I messaged her. A dream where Claire was standing in the ocean, holding a mirror, crying. She was trying to hand it to me, Julia said. But the waves kept pulling her away. That's when I knew. This wasn't a story I could carry alone. I flew to Portland that weekend. When she opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, yes, but also grounded, calm, like she had nothing to prove. We sat in silence for a while. Then I handed her the iPad. She hesitated. "Do you really want me to read it?" she asked. I nodded. She read for hours. Barely moved. Barely blinked. And when she finished, she closed the device softly and whispered she was trying to come home. She just didn't know how. I asked her what had happened, what had really caused the rupture between them. She stood up, walked to her bookshelf, pulled out a small blue notebook. "This," she said, is the story no one ever asked me to tell. And in that moment, I knew Claire's diary was only half the truth. The other half was about to break. I heard again. The blue notebook was worn at the edges, like it had been held too tightly too many times. Julia opened it and began to read aloud, not like a performance, but like someone finally removing a stone from her chest. Claire and I started the Julia and Me podcast in 2016. It was small, messy, unfiltered. We talked about therapy, depression, recovery, things no one was ready to say out loud, but people listened. We had something real. Then she paused, and then came the offer. A brand had reached out, a major one. They wanted Claire to be the face of a wellness rebrand. But there was one condition. They only wanted Claire, not Julia, not the podcast. Just the prettier, calmer, more marketable half. Claire cried when she told me, Julia said. She said it wasn't personal, that we'd circle back later, that she'd find a way to bring me in, but she never did. Julia didn't scream. She didn't rage. She just disappeared, and Claire's star rose. That was the trade. Julia had. Asked Claire not to erase her. Claire did anyway. In an entry from Julia's notebook, dated just weeks after the fallout, she wrote, I don't hate her. I hate what this world turns people into when they're chasing a spotlight. But what hit me the hardest wasn't the betrayal. It was what Julia said next. Claire reached out last year. She wanted to meet, said she missed me. But I said no. I wasn't ready. I thought there would be time. There wasn't. And now Julia lived with a silence she couldn't repair. We sat in her kitchen that night. Two women mourning the same person in different ways. Me, the friend who never saw. Behind the smile. Her, the sister who did, and turned away. We both had pieces of Claire, but now we had a decision, because Claire's story wasn't just sad. It was important. It was a mirror, held up to an entire culture, a world obsessed with perfection while quietly bleeding inside. And if we stayed silent, we'd be doing the exact thing Claire feared the most. She asked me to decide. I whispered, what would you do? Julia didn't answer. She just turned to the final page of her notebook, and there, in her handwriting, were 6 words. Truth is not betrayal, it's release. Julia and I stayed up until 3 a.m. that night, surrounded by empty tea mugs and pages of notes. We were both exhausted, not just from reading Claire's words, but from holding the weight of what they meant. If we publish the diary, I said, people will turn her into a cautionary tale. A scandal, that's not what she deserves. But if we don't, Julia countered, then we're letting the lie win. And how many other Claires are out there dying behind a ring light? We decided on a compromise. Not an expose, not a headline, but a story. Told on our terms. Told. As Claire would have wanted, honest, raw, but not cruel. We'd anonymize some names, blur certain details, but the essence, the voice, it would be hers, and it would live. We called it Offline. A digital memorial, a podcast, a platform, a mirror. Each episode would begin with one of Claire's diary entries, followed by conversations between Julia and me unpacking the layers, the lies, the wounds, the choices, but the real surprise, the video. Claire had filmed something. A final message. We found it inside a folder on her desktop, labeled break glass in case of truth. In the video, she looked tired, not defeated, but real. Her voice cracked. Her eyeliner was smudged. She didn't try to be perfect. If you're watching this, she said, it means I didn't make it through, but maybe my words can. Maybe if you hear me, really hear me, you'll stop chasing the wrong version of yourself. Maybe you'll choose real over liked. She ended the video by placing her hand on her heart and whispering, remember me as I am now, not as I pretended to be. Julia cried, I cried, and somewhere I think Claire finally breathed. We knew what we had to do, but before we could release anything, something happened. An email from Claire's manager. Subject line, cease and desist. Asterisk, the subject line hit. Like a slap. Cease and desist, unauthorized use of estate materials. Claire had been gone for barely 2 weeks, and already the machine was moving to protect her brand, not her truth. The email was cold, sterile, no condolences. No acknowledgement of grief. It came from a legal team representing her image rights, brand partnerships, and estate controlled, unsurprisingly, by her former manager, Darren Lively. He was the one Claire had named in her diary, the one who took 30% and threatened her with reputation damage if she ever left his agency. And now, he was trying to bury her again. The email demanded we hand over all digital materials in our possession. Her iPad, the journals, the video. They claimed it was all proprietary, creative content under her media contract, even her diary. She signed over her likeness and IP, the email read, including unpublished material relevant to public perception. In other words, Claire didn't even own her own story anymore. I felt sick. Julia didn't flinch. He's bluffing, she said. He's trying to scare us. Claire didn't leave this in his hands. She left it in yours. We needed proof. So we checked the final entries again, and that's when we found it. A scanned PDF buried in a folder titled Personal. It was Claire's will. Not the legal version signed by lawyers, just something typed in a moment of clarity. Dated 6 months before she died. Not notarized, not official, but intentional. If anything happens to me, I want my story, my real story, to be protected by Emily Harper. I trust her with the truth. And if you're reading this, don't let them own me again. It wasn't legally binding, but it was morally explosive, and it was exactly what we needed to move forward. We met with a lawyer, a real one who specialized in digital estates and posthumous rights. He warned us, even if Claire had wanted her truth told, the contract she'd signed in life could be used to silence her in death. You're walking into a storm, he said. Then we better bring lightning. Julia answered. We launched the podcast exactly 30 days after Claire's funeral. We called the first episode The Smile That Lied. It opened with her voice soft, trembling from one of the audio notes. Everyone says they love me, but I'm not even sure I like myself anymore. Then Julia and I told the story. Not all of it, just enough to shake the silence. We didn't name names. We didn't accuse. We didn't sensationalize. We humanized, and people listened. 48 hours, we had over 100,000 downloads. Comments flooded in. Messages from strangers, some influencers, some followers who felt like we were telling their story too. I thought I was alone in this. This is the first time I've cried. Listening to a podcast. Please don't stop. We need this. Asterisk, but we also got threats, emails, calls, anonymous, legal warnings. Darren's team sent a second cease and desist, this time more aggressive, accusing us of defamation and interference with contractual obligations. But we had something they didn't, Claire's voice, and the court of public opinion was listening. When episode 2 dropped, the brand behind the breakdown, a popular mental health TikToker stitched it with her own story. A brand that demanded she keep posting through panic attacks. The video went viral. Suddenly, Claire's story wasn't just hers anymore. It was a spark. And behind the scenes, something else happened. We were contacted by a woman named Tanya Green, a former assistant of Darren's. She wanted to talk, said she had files, proof of how Claire was manipulated, gaslit, and even medicated to keep her functional during live tours. She didn't want money. She wanted justice. She said one thing that stuck with me. Claire wasn't a brand. She was a girl screaming in a language none of us understood. Until now. We arranged a meeting. Tanya handed us a flash drive, and what was on it wasn't just incriminating. It was career ending. And if we released it, it could burn the entire machine to the ground, but it would also burn Claire's image with it. The flash drive was labeled Project Halo. Inside were folders, emails, call transcripts, voice memos. At first glance, it looked like a marketing campaign. But the deeper we dug, the clearer it became. Claire wasn't the architect of her brand. She was the product. One document was a timeline month by month detailing what Claire should post, wear, eat, and say. There were scripts for authentic moments, scheduled breakdowns, fake recoveries. There was even a memo titled Claire's 3-phase comeback, from burnout to boss babe. It included instructions for her to go silent for 10 days, return with an emotional Instagram video, tears recommended, and follow up with a healing retreat package. Available for $3.99. It was all designed. Plan. Monetized. She didn't just lose herself, Julia whispered. She was sold off in pieces, but the worst part? The emails, messages between Darren and a pharmaceutical sponsor, they discussed increasing Claire's anti-anxiety dosage without her knowledge, switching brands mid-contract to secure a partnership. One message even referenced using her symptoms as strategic vulnerability, let her lean into it. Mental health content performs, just make sure she doesn't go too far. Julia slammed the laptop shut. We were shaking, disgusted, furious, and heartbroken all over again, because releasing this would finally expose the truth, not just about Darren, but about the entire industry. But it would also pull Claire's name through a storm she never asked for. The podcast was already gaining momentum, and the public still saw Claire as the girl who glowed, healed, smiled. Were they ready to see her as a victim? As a symbol of exploitation? As human? She gave you permission, Julia said. She wanted the real story told. Yes, I replied. But can we protect her and destroy them at the same time? That night, we didn't sleep. We drafted a plan. We weren't going to leak the files. We were going to tell the story behind them. But first, we needed someone brave enough to read the darkest email out loud on the next episode. And there was only one person who had earned that right. We invited Tanya Green to be our first guest. She didn't hesitate. We met in a borrowed podcast studio, small, windowless, quiet. She sat across from Julia and me, hands folded, her voice steady but her eyes betraying years of quiet guilt. I was complicit, she said. I scheduled the shoots. I handed Claire her talking points. I told her to smile. When I knew she wanted to scream, we opened the episode with her reading the email, the one that made our stomachs turn. It was dated April 9th, just 4 months before Claire's death. Darren had written to the pharmaceutical brand rep, Claire's panic episodes are increasing. She's questioning the schedule again. If she pulls out of the Glow Up series, it could cost us 6 figures. We may need to gently increase her med dosage, remind her it's doctor approved. Use Tanya if necessary. She trusts her. Tanya's hands trembled as she read her own name. I was the reminder, the gentle voice. I didn't know what I was pushing her toward until it was too late. The silence that followed was brutal. Heavy. Julia finally spoke. What made you come forward? Tanya looked down, then said, the day she died, I was in the office. Darren opened champagne, said the engagement metrics would spike, that we'd release a tribute reel by morning. That was the moment I realized. We weren't in the business of wellness. We were in the business of death in disguise. The episode aired on a Sunday. It hit 1 million downloads. In 36 hours, Claire's fanbase split. Some praised us for telling the truth. Others accused us of exploiting her memory. But then something unexpected happened. A movement started. The hashtag. Hashtag Sinning Up My Feed began trending. Influencers, real people started sharing their unfiltered truths. Burnout, abuse, addiction, loneliness, and suddenly, Claire wasn't just the girl with the glowing skin. She was the one who finally made it okay to tell the truth, but not everyone was happy, especially not Darren. The next email came too. Days later, it wasn't a threat, it was a warning. The subject line was short: "You're next." No signature, no contact info. Just one sentence in the body: "Dig too deep and you'll bury yourselves." I forwarded it to Julia. She replied with a single word: "Coward." But still, I couldn't shake the feeling, that chill in your spine when you realize someone's watching, listening, waiting for you to flinch. Tanya went silent. She didn't respond to our follow-ups. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her Instagram disappeared overnight. We later found out she'd received threats. Real ones. Someone had shown up at her apartment, left a note under her door. Julia wanted to go public with that too. I wasn't so sure. The last thing we wanted was to make Tanya a martyr or Claire a headline, but the machine was starting to panic. Other creators began contacting us, people who had worked under the same agency as Claire, all with eerily similar stories. Darren told me if I gained weight, I'd lose brand deals. I was given scripts for my coming out video. They made me post a miscarriage video. I hadn't even told my mom yet. The machine fed on pain, and Claire was just the first body it couldn't hide. We knew we were close to something big, something systemic. So we planned a live stream, not a podcast episode, a real-time unveiling of Claire's voice, her video, and her words broadcast to the world. We called it The Real Claire. But the day before the stream, my apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, except the iPad, the original diary, Claire's voice, gone. I sat on the floor where it had been, holding the empty charger cable like a lifeline that had snapped. Julia arrived minutes later, trying to erase her again. She said, "But they're too late." Because what they didn't know was this: I had already made backups. 3 of them. And one was hidden somewhere. No one would think to look. In the same place where Claire first built her empire, on a forgotten blog from 10 years ago, long before she became Claire with Grace, before the brand deals and the blue check mark. Claire had a tiny corner of the internet, a WordPress blog called Finding Claire. Asterisk, back then, she was just a grad student with messy hair and big feelings, writing about loneliness, poetry, and tea. It had no CO, no sponsors, just her. I remembered it because I used to leave anonymous comments under the name Someone Will Gets It. She never knew it was me. When we pulled it up, it still existed, archived, untouched. A time capsule from the version of her who hadn't yet learned how to perform joy. And there it was. In the back end, a private post scheduled to publish if the blog was ever accessed again. Title: "If you found this, you're meant to know." She had uploaded everything. Her final video. The audio notes. Scans of the handwritten pages. Even a folder labeled My Truth, with this message attached: "If they try to silence me, tell them I already spoke. If they try to steal my story, remind them it was never theirs to begin with." It was like she knew, like she'd prepared for her own disappearance, not in defeat, but in defiance. Julia and I looked at each other, and for the first time in weeks, we smiled, not because we felt peace, but because Claire had beaten them. She had written herself a backdoor into immortality. That night, we rerouted the live stream to launch from findingclaire.com. At exactly 8 p.m., the homepage changed. A single line appeared, written in white on a black screen. "This is who I really was." The video auto-played. No filters. No edits. Just Claire, sitting in a hoodie, barefaced, looking directly into the lens. She talked for 23 minutes, She talked about fear, about pressure, about losing herself piece by piece. I don't blame the followers. I don't blame the internet. I blame the idea. That worth is something you earn by being liked. Her last line. If you're listening now, then I made it. We ended the live stream in silence, but the world didn't stay quiet. By morning. Hashtag Claire was real was trending. And for the first time, she was thought within hours. Claire's video had been mirrored, translated, stitched into reels and TikToks by people who had never even followed her before. It spread like a wave, not because it was shocking, but because it was honest. In a sea of curated perfection, truth stood out like fire in the dark. Major influencers reposted the link to findingclaire.com with captions like, "This could have been me. I finally feel seen. I was chasing a life that was killing me too." Claire became more than a memory. She became a movement, but with light comes shadow. The media vultures descended quickly. Asterisk. Tabloids ran with headlines like "Influencer's Diary of Despair," "Fame, Meds, and Manipulation." Talk shows debated whether the video was a call for help or revenge stunt. Even celebrities tried to co-opt the moment using Claire's name to promote their own mental health brands. It felt grotesque, but Julia reminded me of something Claire wrote once. If the story doesn't make you uncomfortable, it's probably not real enough. So we kept going. We released episode 4 of the podcast, the day the likes stopped. It focused on the aftermath, what it means to mourn someone who is two people at once. The icon and the invisible girl behind it. Listeners began sharing their own entries, their own diaries. One woman wrote, "I'm a mom of 3. I post about gratitude every day, but I cry every night in my car before going home." A high school teacher shared, "I have 12K followers. I teach mindfulness. I haven't slept without pills in a year." Suddenly, the podcast wasn't just about Claire. It was about all of us. About the masks we wear, the ones we tape on with affirmations and filters, the ones that smile while we crumble. And still, through all this, Darren remained silent. Until one night, we received an email from his personal address. No subject, just one sentence: "I want to talk." Julia wanted to ignore the email. I didn't. If he's finally willing to talk, I told her, let him speak. Let him dig his own grave. We arranged a video call. Darren appeared on screen in a sleek office, perfect lighting, a tasteful bookshelf behind him. Every inch of it screamed control, but his face, it looked tired. Not remorseful, not guilty, just cornered. "You've made your point," he began. "This was never about making a point," Julia said. "This was about telling the truth Claire never got to." He sighed. "You think you're helping? You're ruining what she built. Her legacy, her impact gone, reduced to trauma porn." I leaned in. "She didn't build it, you did. And it broke her." He didn't deny it. Instead, he said something that still echoes in my head. "Do you know how many girls want to be her? You think Claire was the only one? She was the best at hiding it, sure, but they all break eventually. That's the industry. That's the price of being adored." There it was, the core rot. He saw Claire as an investment, a product with ROI, and now the product had turned into a liability. "What do you want, Darren?" I asked. His answer chilled me. "I want it to stop." "You want us to stop?" Julia said. He shook his head. "I want the fire to die down. I want people to forget. I'm offering a settlement. Walk away. Take down the site. Close the podcast. You'll both receive a non-disclosure package. Generous, clean." I almost laughed. He still thought this was about money. About winning. But we weren't playing his game anymore. "You don't get to buy silence again," I said. "Not hers. Not ours." Then Julia said something I'll never forget. "Claire died being liked. Now she lived being heard. And with that, we ended the call. 2 days later, Darren stepped down from his agency, but not before every one of his brand deals pulled out. The fallout had begun, and for the first time, it wasn't Claire who was paying the price. After Darren's resignation, everything changed fast. News outlets that once profited from Claire's polished image began publishing think pieces with titles like "The Cost of Perfection," "What We Learned from Claire," "Monroe's Secret Diary," "Influencer Culture is Broken and We Helped Break It." Some felt genuine. Others were just scrambling to stay relevant. But findingclaire.com exploded. Millions of visits. Thousands of shared stories. We added a new section, Your Voice. A place for people to anonymously upload their own unfiltered truths. It became a living archive, a chorus of realness. No ads, no likes. Just stories. And they came. From a teenage girl in Ohio, I post happy dance videos every day. I have self-harm scars no one sees. From a single father in Nevada, I smile on my cooking channel, but I cry every night thinking I'm not enough. For my kids. From a former model in New York, I was called inspirational. I was also starving. It was no longer about Claire's story alone. It was a reckoning. And yet, in the middle of this storm of change, I missed her every day. There were moments I'd reach for my phone to text her, ask her what she thought of the latest episode, tell her about the backlash, the breakthroughs, and every time I'd feel the emptiness hit again, Julia and I tried to keep going, but the grief had its own rhythm. It didn't care about trends or virality. Then one night, I received an email from Claire's old publicist. Subject, scheduled draft, read this alone. It had been set to auto-send 45 days. After Claire's passing. Inside was a single video file, the final one. Not for the world. For me. I waited until midnight. I lit a candle, opened my laptop, and pressed play. Claire appeared on screen. No filters. No performance. Just her curled up in her favorite gray sweater. Sitting on the old couch we used to share in college, she looked peaceful, and then she smiled, a small, real smile. "Hey, Her voice cracked, but she didn't pause. "If you're watching this, I guess I didn't make it, and I hate that. I really do. Not because I'm gone, but because I left you with the mess I didn't know how to clean up." She took a deep breath. "You were always the one who saw me. Not the version I fed the world, the real me. The me that cried when no one was watching. The me that wanted to run away and become a barista in Oregon. The me that wanted to write bad poetry and wear oversized flannel and just exist." She paused. "The truth is, I got lost. Somewhere between the likes and the algorithms and the expectation to be someone who heals people, I forgot how to heal myself, and I was so afraid of being irrelevant that I became invisible. I felt tears falling before I even realized I was crying. But if you're still listening, it means you didn't let them erase me. You didn't let the brand win. You didn't let the lie live longer than I did. And for that, thank you." She looked down for a moment, then back up. "Promise me something? Promise me you won't spend the rest of your life trying to fix mine. You did enough, more than enough. Now go live your story, not for anyone else, not for likes. Just for you. And if anyone ever asks who I really was, tell them I was complicated, messy, brave, afraid, honest, and real." She leaned forward toward the camera like she used to do when we were whispering secrets after midnight, and tell them I was yours. The screen faded to black. I sat there for what felt like hours, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood that Claire had said everything she ever needed to. The next morning, I woke up to a quiet I hadn't felt in months. Not silence, peace. Claire's final message wasn't just a goodbye, it was permission. Permission to stop carrying the guilt, to stop trying to rewrite her story, because I already had. That week, Julia and I released the final episode of the podcast season. Goodbye, Claire. We didn't end it with a scandal. We didn't play the video. We didn't expose new secrets. We simply remembered her. We told stories no one else knew, how she used to color code her playlists by mood, how she hated cilantro, how she cried every year watching It's a Wonderful Life, even though she swore she was too cool for sappy movies. We talked about the real Claire Dot, and we let the world meet her at last dot in the weeks that followed. The noise faded, the headlines moved on, but the truth stayed. The site remained live. New stories kept arriving, quietly, fearlessly, from every walk of life. A former pastor, a single mom, a Wall Street analyst, a teenage boy who hadn't told anyone he was depressed, until he heard Claire say, "Me too." That was her legacy. Not the brand, not the body, not the glow, but the courage to say, "I'm not okay, and that's okay." Julia went back to Portland. I stayed in the city, but I finally turned off my notifications. Sometimes I visit findingclaire.com, not to monitor, but to remember. And one day, when I was walking home, I saw a young woman crying on a park bench, holding her phone. I recognized the screen. She was watching Claire's video, and I didn't interrupt. Just sat nearby, letting her know she wasn't alone, because that quiet, the longing is what Claire wanted for all of us. To feel seen, to be real, to live without pretending. People often ask me now, what should we learn from Claire's story? And I never give them the perfect answer, because there isn't one. Asterisk Claire's life wasn't a cautionary tale or a viral headline. It was a mirror shining painfully, beautifully onto a world that tells us to perform joy instead of feel it, to chase attention instead of connection. She died a public figure, but she lived quietly as something far more powerful, a human being, flawed, loving, cracked open by pressure, held together by courage, and maybe that's all any of us are trying to be. If you're watching this now, maybe you felt it too, that hollow ache that comes from living behind a screen, that exhaustion of being on, even when your soul wants to rest. Maybe you've posted a smile when you were breaking inside. Maybe you've chased a version of yourself that you no longer recognize. This isn't just Claire's confession. It's yours. It's mine. It's ours. And maybe that's why this matters so much, not because it's dark or dramatic or shareable, but because it's true. So if the story touched you, if you saw yourself in even one line of Claire's words, then I ask you to do one thing: let the truth breathe. Let it exist without fixing, without branding, without shame. And if you can, tell your story too, because someone somewhere needs to know they're not alone. They need to know that real is still out there, that hope is still alive, and that being human is more than enough. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. If this story moved you, we invite you to subscribe to Silent Confessionals. We share stories that reveal the unseen, the unspoken, and the unforgettable. Leave a comment below and tell us how this story made you feel. Or simply write, "I see you." And if you haven't yet, share this with someone who needs to hear it, because healing begins when truth is no longer hidden. Until next time, this was Silent Confessionals, and this was Claire Asterisk